About it, I can't think of anything. Again, it was a very long time ago, and it's possible that I'm forgetting something, but nothing comes to mind.
Okay. Was asked under oath about certain terms in his yearbook, boofing and Devil's Triangle. He said those were about flatulence, and Devil's Triangle is a drinking game. You say, that's been disputed by other people. You say you know that is not true. Can you just explain how you know that? And you say you actually heard Brett Kavanaugh and his friends, or at least someone else in the room, using those terms in a way that it didn't mean what he said under oath.
Yeah, I guess I was not alone. I've heard and read a lot of people saying the same kind of thing, so I don't have any special inside knowledge here, but I was shocked when I heard that, because those words were commonly used, and they were references to sexual activities. If you think about the context in which you might hear those words, the way that he described they're defined and the way that they are defined, they're not interchangeable. So I heard them talking about it regularly. I think that contributed to some of my feelings about the fact that these guys treated women in a way I didn't like. But I'm not a specialist in language. I wasn't the only person who heard it. I can just say that I was surprised when I heard him say they meant those things.
So I really believe that Brett Kavanaugh is not a gang rapist, a sexual predator, or a stumbling, bumbling drunk. I really believe that, and I don't care whether you believe it or not.
Lou Dobbs, host Lou Dobbs tonight on Fox Business. He joins us tonight. So, Lou, if you're attending the Atlantic Conference, you consider yourself like an erudite person.
Oh.
This is not a cross-section of America.
Oh, no.
These are people with HBS degrees who worked at McKinsey. Like, they're way better than you and much smarter.
Absolutely.
And yet their response is boo.
By the way, that's a very large club. You just the fact is that these people who were booing Lindsey Graham, they think of themselves as the literati.
Yes.
In fact, they're more gaudy than literati. And the further truth is they're ill-mannered sops. And many of them just outright ideological hacks. So I have no idea how they got the idea that this was some sort of festival, unless they're celebrating their inadequacy to chronicle our times and to enlarge our minds. It is a farce.
Do you think if Creepy Porn Lawyer had been up there on the stage,
it would have been perfect.
Eyes too close together and the whole thing, do you think they would have booed him?
I don't think they would at all. I think they couldn't have resisted a standing ovation. They could have, and the excitement in the room would have verged on the obscene and vulgar.
What's so interesting is you see a lot of revolutions, you read about them, they're almost always waged on behalf of the working class. Have you ever seen a revolution like this one waged against the working class?
I haven't. I haven't even read such a revolution. And these people are not revolutionaries. They're far too orthodox. They're far too mediocre in their own
good point
imaginings. And frankly, they can't escape themselves and their base, crass, and yes, vulgar obsessions. These are people completely consumed by grievance, by identity and group, to the point that they have lost any sense of individual responsibility or individual right. They're authoritarian to the point of being not socialist, communist. They want to be Marxist, they want to be fascist, and by the way, their desires are coming true. What they are doing is ignoring truth, ignoring values, ignoring any sort of fidelity to decency, and what they have become is frankly unspeakably ugly and awful and threatening to the very republic.
How do so many unimpressive, small-minded people make so much money and get so much money? Somebody needs to study this. We're unfortunately out of time. Will you write a book on that? Because I will read every word of it.
Will you let me have all of the advance on it and everything?
I don't know. I don't know if there's a market for it. I'd buy it.
I'll take up the assignment. Thanks so much.
Great to see you, Lou. Thank you.
Great to see you, Tucker.
Hillary Clinton yesterday indicated that regardless of his guilt or innocence, Brett Kavanaugh disqualified himself because of his temperament. Watch.
We have not seen anything quite like that for a long time. Justice Thomas vigorously defended himself, as some of us can remember, and it was a very painful, difficult time for Anita Hill and for many of us watching. It very much felt like, in fact it probably was, the denial of the legitimacy of women's stories. In this case, though, the performance, the behavior was quite out of bounds.
Keep in mind that is the very same crowd you just saw boo Lindsey Graham. That would be worth remembering how Hillary Clinton herself behaved when she appeared before the Senate. Here's a reminder.
The fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Because it's really about temperament. Richard Goodstein is a former advisor to both Bill and Hillary Clinton. And despite his bad opinions, a great guy, and we're glad to have him. Richard, thank you very much.
And I was in the audience, just for the record, when Lindsey Graham spoke today at the Atlantic. Just the instant
Were you
full
really?
disclosure.
Well, you must have a Harvard degree. I'm very impressed. You probably do, actually. But let me ask you, so Hillary Clinton, when she called Monica Lewinsky a narcissistic Looney Tune, and I'm quoting now, was she believing all women when she said that?
Well, I mean, that's not a quote. That was a report.
It is a quote.
Look, what she was trying to say in the Atlantic interview yesterday is that unlike the 11 and a half hours that she submitted to testimony and kept her calm on the Benghazi hearings on the House side, where Trey Gowdy concluded she had done nothing wrong, Brett Kavanaugh, after less than 15 minutes, totally fell apart. And again, is that the behavior that we want to see in a Supreme Court justice? That's really the only point that she was making.
Yeah, no, it's a totally fair point. You accuse someone of the sex crime with no evidence. His family's completely under attack. He'll never work again. People are calling for his impeachment before he even gets on the court. That's totally cool. Imagine if you really didn't do it or believed you didn't do it. How would you? I'm surprised he was as calm as he was. Honestly, like, how would you respond? Sincere question.
As far as the evidence is concerned, the evidence is Mark Judge's girlfriend, at least in the papers, was reported to have said that he confessed to her behavior like this. She said this to a therapist. You know, I heard your earlier guest.
Wait, confess that Mark Judge did that? So Mark Judge has now been nominated for the court? Or
no.
What, are we going to bring him up on? Why are we attacking Mark Judge exactly? What does he have to do with anything?
But what we want is somebody who is unimpeachable, not unindictable.
Who is not friends with Mark Judge? Like, what is Mark Judge? So Mark Judge's girlfriend,
yes,
Elizabeth Razor, I think her name is, from Maine, says that Mark Judge at one point told her during their 6-year relationship that he had done something bad in high school. Okay. What does that have to do with Brett Kavanaugh exactly?
Well, it may be evidence, and we'll find out what Mark Judge says if we ever get a look at this FBI interview, that he may have actually been there. And you know,
Mark Judge already said under oath that he wasn't, that this didn't happen.
Through his lawyer submitted a letter. Let's subject him to kind of.
It was a sworn statement. I mean, he could be brought up on
subject him to
perjury
cross-examination. That was the flaw in Rachel Mitchell's report, is that she was basically opining. She never talked about Kavanaugh's testimony. She never spoke openly to Ford separately. So let's let the FBI kind of get the facts out, and then we'll see, you know, whether any of these stories hold up or not. What the president said last night was despicable.
Okay, so here's what, right, and maybe we should throw Mark Judge in prison because his former girlfriend said he said something uglier. I mean, I think that's the standard now. As a guest explained last night, if you feel it in your heart, it's true, because America actually has gone crazy. I only have a U.S. passport, so I'm here to the end. I'm going to keep fighting against this, but a lot of other people are going to leave. Let me, really quickly, do you think, and I hate, you know, going into like the deep, dark past, not 37 years ago, but like 20 years ago, but do you think Hillary should apologize for directing the smear campaign against her husband's former girlfriends?
You know,
which she did.
I think there were people in the Clinton White House who hung on to the notion that Monica Lewinsky was making things up. I never heard Hillary Clinton say that publicly, and everybody who was kind of a public defender of Bill Clinton's never said that. And all I'm saying is, let's, Brett Kavanaugh is up for a lifetime appointment.
Wait, stop. I covered it. I was there for all of it. And Sidney Blumenthal was, of course, the closest.
But never publicly.
Yeah.
He never actually went on the air and said those crazy things.
He said it to me, actually, directly to me on the telephone the day that it broke. She's a stalker. So this was being directed by Hillary. There's no debate about it. A lot of books written on this. People who work for Hillary have said it. Look, I'm not saying she should go to hell for it or go to prison, But shouldn't she apologize at least for that?
I got bad news for your audience. Hillary Clinton is not running for president.
No, but
You can
shouldn't
run
she
as many
as a
segments as you want.
person? Shouldn't she just say, "I'm sorry, you know what? I felt my husband was under attack. I attacked his girlfriends. I shouldn't have. I should have believed all women." You never said
Again,
that.
she talked about a vast right-wing conspiracy, which I think the record shows, and Brett Kavanaugh was part of it. Why did he have that prurient interest? Listen,
Okay.
no, listen,
I'm sorry, I'm
Tucker,
gonna
why
have to
did
call
Brett
time.
Kavanaugh
Not just
have
'cause
a
we're out of time.
prurient interest in Bill Clinton's sex life and what he and
he's a
Monica
sex
Lewinsky
criminal.
did? Doesn't
He's
that
a
kind of
sex
trace
criminal.
up here?
This is too crazy.
Just asking.
Great, that's an excellent point. Richard, great to see you tonight. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Good try. Good try. Democrats have not proven any of these allegations against Kavanaugh. Some are now saying he must step aside simply for being accused. That's a brand new standard in the country that you grew up in. Are you comfortable with it? We're going to ask Alan Dershowitz if he is. That's next.
Something I could do, but he doesn't say that.
Jimmy Roach, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, with me now is David Gergen, Kirsten Powers, Jeffrey Toobin, and Michael Caputo. David, I'm wondering, he's
Should. And I think he was thoughtful and admitted his own weaknesses, which I thought was important. And it's very important for viewers to know that you wouldn't have had him on the air unless CNN had checked him out for his reliability. I mean, he didn't randomly walk in here. You had to think about this.
I mean, he was the only direct roommate at that time that Brett Kavanaugh had.
Right. And, so you're left with the impression he's pretty credible. Are there others out there that we should also be hearing from in order to make a fair judgment about Judge Kavanaugh?
But if he has no direct knowledge of Debbie Ramirez's allegations or of witnessing anything, maybe he says she said something to him, but he's not really clear on that. If it's simply a question of Brett Kavanaugh not accurately describing his drinking habits 30-something years ago, I think there's a lot of people out there who'll say, well, so what?
Well, let me make the counter-argument, because he honestly believes he didn't do it because he doesn't know. He has no memory of it. And then secondly, there is this, we keep talking about something that happened 35 years ago. He has been tested.
In New Jersey saying, as you just heard, it doesn't really matter if Brett Kavanaugh is innocent or if he's guilty. Democrats have spent so long attacking him without tangible evidence that really it's his obligation to just submit and let his career and reputation and family be destroyed, for the good of the country. It's a moral question. Alan Dershowitz is a retired Harvard Law professor. He's the author of the best-selling The Case Against Impeaching Trump. He is our reality check on first principles, and he joins us tonight. Do you think, Professor, that that's a fine stand? It doesn't matter whether he's innocent or guilty. He should just submit.
Well, it sounds very familiar. When I was in college, that's what they said about people who are accused of being communists.
Yes.
It doesn't matter whether you're innocent or guilty. If somebody is accused of you of being a communist and you angrily responded and said you're not, then A, you don't have the temperament to have the job. And it's just a job interview if you're getting fired from being a professor after 40 years. And what's the difference if you're innocent or guilty? Somebody has said you're a communist. This goes all the way back to the Inquisition, when they would call you in first and make you testify, and then they'd present the evidence. Look, once you're accused of the most heinous crime imaginable, it turns into a trial where you have due process,
yes,
where the burden of proof is on the other side, where the evidence has to be clear and convincing. In America, we don't allow people to destroy other people's reputations and careers based on an inference of guilt, the way the ACLU now says. The ACLU says we should presume guilt, not presume innocence.
After 100 years of defending due process, that's exactly what they're saying. So you are a liberal, you have lived your life in a liberal world, you go to Martha's Vineyard, you know liberals. Do any of them ever say, look, I don't agree with Kavanaugh, I hate Trump, but I agree with you that due process is worth preserving? Are there liberals who feel that way?
I've found very, very few of them. For example, today, 700 law professors signed a letter. They asked me to sign it. I refused. I wrote a dissent, saying he now no longer has the judicial temperament. Well, can you imagine if this were a liberal who had been appointed by a liberal president who had been accused and who had acted similarly? I don't think a single one of those professors would have signed that letter. They all fail the shoe on the other foot test. Senator Booker, who I like and know, is just dead wrong. This is all about partisanship. If the opposite was happening, and if it was the Democrats who were putting up a candidate, everybody would be behaving the opposite way. And so it is partisanship. And I think the framers of our Constitution never intended the confirmation process to look anything like this.
I agree. And I hope that I would be honest enough to say so. I mean, we defended Al Franken on this show, whom I don't like personally, and I hate his politics, but I think he got shafted for the same reason.
Defended him too?
Yes, he deserved to be defended. You wrote, or you were quoted in a recent piece saying that Julie Swetnick's lawyer may have a legal obligation to withdraw her previous statement. What did you mean?
Yeah, I've done some research now on it, and there are ethical and bar rules that say that when you submit an affidavit, even to Congress, and you later learn that there are things in the affidavit that are false, you have a continuing obligation to withdraw the affidavit. You cannot allow an affidavit to remain on the record if you have information suggesting it's false. And any reasonable lawyer hearing her on television says you can't any longer accept what's in that affidavit. She has to be investigated independently of the background check, criminally investigated, to see if she deliberately and willfully, with or without the aid of anybody else, made a decision just to frame somebody for something that he had nothing to do with. The evidence seems to suggest they never knew each other, they were years apart, they were operating in different circles. It wouldn't surprise me if an FBI investigation proved they never met each other. And if that turns out to be the fact, she belongs in a court of law, being prosecuted with a presumption of innocence.
Yes.
I'll defend her. But if the evidence shows that she committed perjury, prison.
Wow.
You know why? Because it's
so
important to protect people against being raped, but it's so important to protect people against being deliberately and willfully, falsely accused of rape. That is a very, very serious crime, and we tend not to pay as much attention to false, deliberately false. I'm not talking about people making
I understand.
and forgetting, but deliberately false frame-ups of rape have to be taken seriously.
And they're not, I happen to know. Alan Dershowitz, Professor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Free speech is evaporating in this country after 240 years. The biggest threat turns out not to be the government, but instead corporations, schools, and especially the online mob. What happened, and more importantly, how can you say what you really think in the face of all of this? Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports is managing to do that. He joins us next to this
exemplary record and a history of fairness.
Judge Kavanaugh has impeccable credentials, unsurpassed qualifications, and a proven commitment to equal justice under the law.
I will keep an open mind in every case, and I will always strive to preserve the Constitution of the United States and the American rule of law.
Call the Senate and tell them this is no time for obstructionist politics. It's time to confirm Judge Kavanaugh.
I lost 25.
Previously on the show, we've told you how employees at Google discussed altering search results to undermine the White House's immigration policies. At the time, Google said it has never changed search results for political reasons, and it never will. We knew it was untrue then. Now we can prove that it is untrue. This show has obtained internal Google emails in which an employee discusses editing YouTube search results to suppress videos based on their political content. Here's one example. Last March, Google engineer Dong Zhao sent an email saying the company wanted to, and we're quoting, demote low authoritative content on controversial queries to fight against fake news. This was not hypothetical. He said the company had already succeeded in suppressing unwanted videos for searches like Hillary and, we're flattered here, Tucker. It's not clear which videos were suppressed because Google won't admit it or tell us, but the email does indicate that Alex Jones and InfoWars were a major target of this. Google says their efforts are not political and meant to fight conspiracy theories, though for the record, we have never endorsed any kind of conspiracy theory on the show and never would. And by the way, how does Google define a conspiracy theory? They haven't told us that either, or why a superpower global monopoly ought to be making that decision in the first place, since they have a congressional exemption in which they promise not to. They promise to be a conduit through which information flows and not a news site that edits it. Congress might want to rethink that agreement. Well, it's no secret that free speech is evaporating in this country. Even if the government is still prevented from punishing your speech, you're more than likely than ever to be suspended from school, fired from your job, or banned from social media for saying something that dissents from the consensus or that simply makes a few people feel bad. Dave Portnoy is at the very center of this. You may know him as El Presidente. He's the founder of Barstool Sports, the beating heart of it. Barstool Sports is not a political site, but it has faced repeated demands that it be censored, so we want to talk to him about what that is like. Dave, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You're not a political site. I wouldn't say you're a conservative. I think you're probably a liberal. I'm not going to ask you. I don't know what your politics are. But you're not a political guy. But you have been the target of repeated demands for censorship. Have they increased in the last few years? If so, why? And what do you do?
Yeah, they have increased nonstop. We just keep trying to be us. Now, we've grown. We're probably over 100 people now in the company. And there's differing views because the more I talk, the more I tell the truth, the more people may come at us from different angles. But my philosophy and how I started the company is I will just always tell it as I see it. I won't be dictated to by outside forces. But it's definitely increased. It's definitely been a major increase in the last 2 years on how people attack us, basically.
So what don't they like? Since you're not a political site, I know a lot of our viewers are frequent Barstool Sports. They know you're not pushing a political agenda. So why are people mad at you? What triggers them?
It's tough to say. A lot of it, they view us as sexist. They view us as a sexist site, and we have in the past. Well, in the Sports Illustrated, we feature girls in bikinis at different times. It's a men's culture website. Amongst other things, we consider ourselves a comedy site. And then the narrative starts to build. A lot of the people who comment now really have no idea who we are. They see something linked on Twitter. They see somebody maybe comment about an article, and then when I react to them or talk to them or go any deeper, they literally have no clue what we do. They're just seeing this cycle, this vicious cycle basically on social media, and it all just feeds on itself. But they don't know our history, they don't know me, they don't know what we've been doing for 50 years.
It seems like it's a war on humor itself. Like there's something about jokes that makes a certain kind of person really angry.
Yeah, it's hard to say. They just fulfill on each other. Social media, I think a lot of it, social media has just given people a voice that, they can exert pressure on advertisers and do different things. And if they don't like something you said, or they think a joke isn't funny, or they take something literally, I've always explained it this way. For us, it would be if somebody went to a comedy show and they didn't have a ticket, they didn't know who the comedian was. They walked into the room, they heard a joke, then they walked out in the street and said, hey, you'll never believe what this guy's saying, but they give no context of how the joke was told, where they saw it. That's what happens a lot of times with people like us, and I think a lot of people in the comedian business.
So the irony, actually the reason I want to talk to you more than any other is that you have not bowed before the online mob, begged and scraped for forgiveness. You've continued to do what you think is right, which is telling the truth, and you have thrived.
Yeah, and at some level, I've benefited since I started the company, and I ran it myself with other employees, but I was at the top, until 2 years ago when we sold half of it to a group of investors, a Chernin Group, who have stood behind what we did. And I would rather, this may sound crazy, I'd rather go down with the ship than give in to these people. I just can't do it because I know who I am. I know my character. I know the character of the people that we hire. I will not let people who have no idea what we do, no idea how hard we work, no idea how long we did it. We outworked, out-hustled, out-blogged everybody else that we did. I'm not going to let somebody who has no idea what we do make stuff up about us, pull stuff out of context, and make me change what I do. I will not do it.
Brave people win in the end, and you're living proof of it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
I'm kind of inspired.
I'm fired up myself.
Good for you, El Presidente. Well, The View is supposed to be a chatty, inoffensive daytime talk show, but it's not anymore. It's kind of getting a little nutty, actually. We're going to tell you what happened most recently on that program after this. Donald Trump Jr. recently noted that the Kavanaugh saga has made him worried about his own sons. He's not the only one who feels that way. Well, on The View, Whoopi Goldberg says that if he has that fear, it must be because his sons are future rapists. Watch this.
You only worry about this for your child if you think your child has these tendencies. If your child is not someone who's assaulting people, it shouldn't be a concern for you.
Don Jr.'s oldest son, by the way, is not even 10 years old. But that's not surprising what you just heard. The View has recently warped from a breezy daytime show into a font of deranged propaganda. Not an overstatement.
These white men, old, by the way, are not protecting women. They're protecting a man who is probably guilty.
I have to tell you, as a woman, I think you're trying to take my rights away.
That's right.
Get out of my behind. Get out of my vagina. Get out.
So it's almost like they're worried that, oh, white people are going to lose all their power. Pretty soon we'll be like South Africa, apartheid, where 10% of white people were running the country.
You know what's horrible? When the president of the United States whips up people to beat the hell out of people. No. Say goodbye.
The president has started this war against the media. These are the acts, in my opinion, of a dictator.
Joy Behar, Karen Johnson, acting under her stage name Whoopi Goldberg, and the rest. Ann Coulter is a columnist, a great one, author of the book Resistance is Futile, How the Trump-Hating Left Has Lost Its Collective Mind, and possibly a View watcher. Who knows? She joins us tonight. What do you make of this? This is not the View that you remember, is it?
Well, I can't say I was ever a huge View watcher, but I've liked it. I do think the left has lost its mind over Trump. I think it's worth pointing out, I'm listening to this hate speech from the left on Kavanaugh. Senators Collins and Murkowski and Flake, you know, they're so touchy about, the loss of civility under Donald Trump, and he's so... he's so indecent. We want to respect our institutions. If you want to respect the institutions, then vote to confirm Kavanaugh and end this mob attack on obviously a very respectable and perhaps the most impressive judge who's ever been nominated.
But it's a little weird where it's
Supreme
coming
Court.
from. So you'll remember a couple of weeks ago, all of us were informed by our superiors that we needed to hate Alex Jones, who had a website because it was a threat to our democracy. This is the ABC broadcast network. This is one of the oldest and biggest broadcast networks. And you have one of their main anchors accusing someone's 9-year-old son of being a potential rapist.
Well, I liked Whoopi's mention of criminal tendencies, and I'm thinking this idea of criminal tendencies is something we should start working into the criminal law. We're definitely going back to stop and frisk if we're allowed to consider criminal tendencies.
Well, that's right.
This is so contrary.
First of all, shame on you for thinking through the implications of what Whoopi Goldberg says.
Not to say the more obvious point of, this idea that, well, you only need to worry about this if you're a criminal. Why do we have to get warrants to search somebody's house then? No, there are rules for these things, and the basic rule is that there should be evidence. One of the things I kept...
Evidence? You're an extremist, Ann Coulter. I can't believe we're giving you a platform. Evidence?
One of the things I keep hearing people say is... how credible she's not a doctor, only an MD is a doctor. Dr. Ford was, how credible the acts as if this is a case that we're all just going to sit home in our living rooms and watch this, and well, she seemed credible to me. But, Meryl Streep was credible in Sophie's Choice. She wasn't at Auschwitz. She hasn't committed suicide. No, we're not talking about just judging someone's performance. That's why we have evidence, and wow, the evidence is overwhelmingly against Christine Blasey Ford, not a licensed psychologist. I do think the tide seems to have turned because I am a hate watcher. I mostly watch MSNBC and CNN, and I noticed since these latest, the ex-boyfriend of Dr. Ford, has come out and said, I lived with her for 6 years. She never talks about sexual assault. She flew all the time. She's not afraid of closed spaces. Oh yeah, and she stole $600 from me. Suddenly they're talking about Russia again.
I'm so glad that you watch that and keep us current. Boy, I've never missed your column. Ann Coulter, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Well, we have new evidence tonight that academia literally is a joke. We couldn't make this up if we tried. We wish we had, actually, because it's so good. By the way, Ship of Fools, out this week. If you want to know why... Modern academia is widely seen as a joke. If you've got kids in college, you know it is. Now we have proof that, in fact, it really is. 3 academics spent 10 months writing bogus articles in fields like gender studies and fat studies and getting them accepted in top journals. One paper rewrote a chapter from Mein Kampf from a feminist perspective. Another discussed rape culture in dog parks and declared one of the best papers in the history of feminist geography. Now the hoax has been exposed. Are the grievance studies experts rethinking their careers? Of course not. Instead, the consensus is that the paper's authors will be the ones whose careers will suffer. Amazing. That was really short. Time now for the Friend Zone. We bring on one of our friends here in the building onto the show. I'm not the only one with a book out this week. Fox and Friends host Steve Doocy and his wife Kathy have a book of their own at the top of the charts on Amazon. It's called The Happy Cookbook, available right now. Steve Doocy joins us. Thank you, Steve, for coming on. I've seen all the recipes in this. They look delicious.
Yes, you have.
But you wrote, what I didn't know until I talked to Kathy about it was that this book was written for a very specific reason.
You know, Tucker, absolutely. My wife Kathy and I were going to go down to Florida. We were going to get some new sunglasses. She went in to see the eye doctor. He took a look in her eye, said, there's something back there. We wound up going to Will's Eye Hospital in Philadelphia, and they said, you've got ocular melanoma, a very aggressive, rare form of eye cancer. And Dr. Carol Shields was there, came in, said, you know what? We caught it early. I'm going to save your life. And while she was being treated with a radiation patch in the back of her eye, one night she was laying in bed thinking, I got to get my affairs in order. You know, what happens if this does not work?
Yes.
Who's going to take care of my kids? Who's going to cook my kids' favorite foods? Because you're thinking, what can I do? I could write down my recipes. Because so many recipes in our lives, you know, our moms didn't write down for us. And she wanted to make sure that our children had the foods that they grew up eating in that kitchen when they grew up. And they would always have a taste of home.
That is a really heavy story.
It is a heavy
and a
story.
beautiful story in a lot of ways. What of all these recipes do you think about when you're hungry?
Actually, I had it today because of the book rollout. I had the pot roast that my mom used to make when I was a kid. And on my birthday, Kathy will make it. She'll say, you want your mom's pot roast, right? And I'll say, absolutely. And she makes it with the cream of onion soup and the Lipton soup, mixes it together, cooks it all day. When I walk in the house, I am back, I'm 5 years old, and my mom is in the kitchen over by the avocado dishwasher, and Elvis is on the radio, and all is perfect in our life. And you know what? There are a lot of people who have stories, because I think it has struck a chord with